right in. Donnie, you've built an incredible platform. You're helping so many of our brands. Can you tell us about your story, how you started MasonHub, and what the problem MasonHub is solving?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. Well, first of all, thank you for having us here. I'm super excited to have this conversation. So thank you, Michelle, and especially Daniel, who is one of our premier clients. So we really appreciate having him here. By way of background, I really started my career in the logistics space. I was working for an industrial supply company in central New Jersey, running a pick and pack operation. And that's really where I really fell in love with logistics. But it was an industrial supply company. I consider myself more of a retail fashion guy. That's the industry I wanted to get into. So I went to get my MBA at Stanford, and post Stanford, I joined Revlon as a brand manager. Did that for a few years, really enjoyed it, but really missed the action of operations. So I took a position as the director of operations, which for a company, a small company at the time by the name of Gilt.com. Really exciting flash sale, fashion retail, and I was their first director of operations. We scaled that business from 8 million to 500 million in 4 years, super exciting growth. And that's where I was really introduced to fulfillment as a service model. It was very painful. Not only was the technology antiquated, but the service was challenging. So I went on to work for a couple other retail businesses, started a successful consulting business, came up against the same challenges for all of the brands I was supporting. And that's where the genesis of MasonHub came, right? Where we knew that we could implement the technology and the service required, necessary in this market. And really, MasonHub is an order management and fulfillment platform that allows brands to customize fulfillment experiences and work with multiple channels. So ultimately, what we're doing is helping brands scale.
But by the way, such a diverse background, right? And you've seen it, done it, been there. I mean, speaking of someone else who's seen it, been there, done that, Daniel, let's hear from you. Can you tell everyone about your background? I dug into your LinkedIn, so I know a bit.
Oh, really? Okay, that's mostly made up. I just want to say, but no.
It makes sense that you've built an incredible brand. So let's hear your background.
No, thank you for having me here. No, it's I guess my interest in I've had started early in like biodiversity. I think a lot of the guests you had on just recently were talking about that regenerative farming and sustainable agriculture. Came from working summers on my family's farm in New England. My dad comes from a long line of dairy farmers, so I guess you could kind of say like working in harmony with the environment sort of been in my DNA for going back. But I've been an advocate for clean, for like nearly 20 years. I started setting up sustainable supply chains for natural plant actives for Fortune 500 beauty companies in the Southern Hemisphere, mostly from Indonesia, Japan to Africa, Madagascar, and now most recently back in Vermont on that farm I grew up on. We raise all of our own hemp for our CBG and CBG products. But Vegamour started as a pushback against or rebellion against what I thought where the clean beauty industry was headed. I thought the idea was great, and that's why I was really excited about like what we were doing in terms of like producing all these wonderful plant actives that were being used in foods and cosmetics and skin and hair care. But I felt like it was becoming more and more of a marketing claim and creative storytelling than like real like meaningful efficacy through like the actives that we're producing. And so I also realized about the same time, as we were, working on different, I guess just exploring different ways to make our actives more bioavailable. Just some of the way that skincare, hair care was dealing with things, we were dealing with symptoms and not the underlying root causes. And so to me, I was just like, we can't just, otherwise it's like playing whack-a-mole if we're not dealing with the underlying causes. And Vegamour sort of was like, it was born out of a result of that frustration with people not using, like making things bioavailable, using actives at the right percentages, not, thinking about sustainability and biodiversity. and also just like relying more on marketing claims and actual like science to deliver results. And Vegamour is a hair wellness company that birthed out of that kind of like what I observed in nature, like nothing grows healthily in a vacuum. It requires a healthy ecosystem. So our whole 360 holistic approach, it just mirrors nature in the way that we approach hair wellness. Our goal is to change, is to redefine the way people think about hair care by creating this new category, which we're calling hair wellness.
By the way, love that. And that's such a theme, right? Beauty from the inside out again, like the ecosystem effects and really thinking about holistically, which applies to the company, right? Like what is the ecosystem by which the brand could then succeed? So, speaking to that, would love to hear, Dan, from your perspective, where the business was when you developed the relationship with Donnie. And, we're going to hear from Donnie on what his visibility was, but would love to hear, where the company was, paint a picture, and then why you reached out.
We were a really scrappy little startup, and self-funded. So we had to do everything. We had to operate a profit, from the very get-go. And so, as part of that, and also as part of our, sustainability, efforts, we made everything very small and lightweight and very easy to pick and pack and ship. And we did it all internally. And it also gave you the flexibility to kind of like, try different things and try different pack outs and drop little like, surprises. Like there was no method or system to it. It was kind of like, oh, let's surprise this person today. And so it's kind of hard to do that with a 3PL. I did actually, start like reaching out to 3PLs before we reached out to Donnie, and then I reached out to Donnie. And we were a little too small at the time and really disorganized. And we had to get our systems in place first. But what happened towards the end of 2019, we started experiencing this exponential growth. We were doing, from September onwards of 2019, we started experiencing 20% month-over-month growth, and it got to we were still fulfilling inside, from our office space, but like we didn't have a freight elevator, so like we'd have to break open pallets to get the the boxes into the lift up to the office where we could fulfill. I think at that time, COVID started. We were around 600 to 700 orders a day. Now we're closer to like 3,000. It was growing like month over month. We were in a really scary place. I knew that it would normally take quite a while to integrate, to migrate from fulfilling in-house, because we had no bombs. We just did it kind of rather haphazardly. It worked out, but like if you could see how the sausage was being made, it wasn't very. And COVID came, and I thought, well, if one person in our office gets sick, we aren't able to fulfill orders anymore. Also, we didn't really have an inventory management system. We were just like, I would see that, oh, it looks like we're running low on hair serum. We better order some more, because like it was all there in front of me. So it wasn't very scalable, but COVID was a forcing function. There's too many things that could have gone wrong, and we realized we needed to move through a 3PL. I understood it to be a 6-week process, and because like MasonHub and Donnie, I mean, they developed their own system, their own software, their own mechanisms for onboarding. They did it over a weekend, right? I wouldn't recommend it, and Donnie wouldn't recommend it either. But like they were amazing. Their team came in, they looked at what we were doing, they made an analysis. They said here, so we were able to ship. We didn't miss a beat. We did all over a weekend, and then suddenly we had an inventory management system, because we don't have an ERP. We're too small. And so these just kind of it was an amazing sort of like perfectly timed rescue. Thank you, Donnie. And it's enabled us to grow to where we are today. We did in 2020, we did 7 times our revenue of in 2019. So. Huge. I mean, all that was because we were able to fill orders during a very difficult time.
Yeah, well, I'm imagining, by the way, that situation, and I just had a vision of like the Avengers showing up with their like capes. Donnie, can you comment on what it was like? Was there buildings on fire? What was happening from your perspective, where you knew you could really help?
Yeah, so I mean, what Daniel is going through is exciting, right? And that's what we love. We love to see brands exploding like this because based on our background, I was a retailer. I saw explosive growth. We love it, and that's what we were built for. And so I think to Daniel's point, because of our experience and because of the technology that we built, we were easily able to integrate him into our platform, like he said, over a weekend. And all of a sudden, Daniel and his team had visibility into all of their back orders and all of the inventory that they had on hand, so that they could place the orders that they needed to ensure that they were meeting the demand, that their supply was keeping up with their demand.
That is so huge, by the way. I mean, from your perspective, Donnie, what were some of the biggest, you worked with some of the biggest people in the industry, and you know people. So, I mean, you had options. How did you choose Donnie? Obviously, Donnie's a legend, but and lovely. But how did you make that decision? What were the questions you really had to ask yourself to move forward with him as a partner?
Gosh, I resisted the 3PL. I just wanted to have control. I hated not being able to be spontaneous. I hated to have an idea of like having to build my bombs for, I don't know, for Mother's Day, like 6 months out. Like we try different products. We like to see, we're a digitally native brand. We don't have anything out in the retail world. So like we have this direct connection, this line of communication with our customers allows us to pivot really quickly. Any 3PL I ever met with and discussed, the way that we did things, they're just like that. We don't do it that way. They're just completely inflexible and movable, and didn't allow us to be who we are, and it was a scrappy little brand that was at that time, it was trying to figure out like who we wanted to be, like how we could best serve our customer and what their needs were. And because we had that direct access, we were able to pivot very quickly, and just everything, we were flexible all the way up to the point of fulfillment, where 3PLs always was like running into a brick wall. And so with Donnie, I knew him from a mutual friend, and had heard his story. It'd been the first 3PL that I'd spoken to that had like a, didn't have a horrific back end that was built on DOS, that from like the 70s on WAN computers. Like it's atrocious, and it just made it. And what he had done, like just talking about like scaling from guilt to a $500 million. I was like, if anyone could figure out a solution that was flexible and that worked and was able to pivot like we were, it would be Donnie. And so it just kind of, when he brought his team in, he said, "Don't worry, we got this." And I was like, okay, I felt like I was in good hands, and they haven't looked back since.
Yeah, it sounds like he really understood you. You said something really interesting, which is like, you want the flexibility. I mean, if there's something, the event's called Foundermade, right? I know there's a ton of entrepreneurs listening, and rigidity and entrepreneurship are two words. It's like oil and water a little bit, right? Or a lot. And going into an infrastructure where you're getting a lot of no's or a lot of limitations on what capabilities, and being able to adapt that to the entrepreneurial spirit, mindset, mobility, nimbleness, speed, is super important. Donnie, from your perspective, how, obviously they're doing what you do takes a lot of pre-thought, a lot of structure. So I'm curious to know, I mean, is that your specialty, is being able to adapt into that mindset and that spirit? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are really interesting. I think you're super spot on, right? The entrepreneurship, but then the rigidity that's needed. And in operations, you need it to be rigid in order to be repeatable and scalable, right? But what we have done is we have used technology to allow that flexibility. So for instance, Daniel has maybe 60 core SKUs, 30 to 60 core SKUs, depending on the season, right? But they have 600 product combinations that they sell. The platform we built allows them to sell whatever combinations. If he wants tomorrow to say, you know what, I want to sell a hair serum with 5 hair conditioners, that's something that we can support overnight, and it won't bother, or, it's, again, that's not that rigidity that's saying, oh, well, this is going to cost you this, or this is going to have it's going to take us weeks to create these dynamic hittings, and everything is picked out of those 5 or 30 SKUs that he creates. And so that's an example of where we're applying technology to allow flexibility. If you want to start a new ship method, right? These things are generally taking weeks or months for some of our competitors to be able to do. You can create these things overnight. And that's sort of how we think of our product roadmap, is what's going to help our brands continue to ultimately scale based on and this, by the way, these products came out of our own personal experiences, right? So another example is pre-sale, right? So especially during COVID, we had tons, and we continue to have supply chain disruptions. Well, what brand doesn't want to, take advantage of demand where they can pre-sell product without having it physically in their inventory? And we enable brands and create these products, again, to create these spontaneous moments or flexibility, right? So if he wanted to launch a brand or a new product tomorrow and didn't have it, but knew it was in demand, he can spark that up tomorrow on our platform and not worry about having to have multiple meetings about launching something new.
Oh, that's so huge and so refreshing here. And so let's talk about supply chain, a bigger word than ever before. I mentioned this earlier. Donnie, from your perspective, you're sitting in this. What were some of the consistent challenges your brand saw? And do you have any thoughts, from what you experienced at the brand level? What we're going to get to even on from your perspective, Daniel. But let's start with you, Donnie. Like, what were you seeing as the consistent challenges?
Well, this has been a really interesting year for all of us. But I think consistency, and this is what I'm really speaking to a lot of brands about, of like, how do we, what did we learn, right? And how can we mitigate those things? And the reality is that despite e-commerce growing as much as it did in the past year, it's not going away. So first and foremost, reliance on an e-commerce channel is going to be super important. So, for our brands, it's always about making sure that you have the right processes and the right integrations so that you can continue to scale and optimize in that channel. Another huge pain point or challenge we had was the carrier networks, right? So we were faced with unprecedented volume in those channels, obviously with e-commerce, but what that did is it created significant delays across all of the major carriers: UPS, FedEx, DHL. All of them were faced with an immense amount of challenges. And so what I tell clients now, and what we do and offer as a product, is, hey, you should diversify, right? Don't put all your eggs in one basket. We have relationships with most of the major carriers. So why don't we work on a way and we have the technology to say, hey, let's optimize time to customer or lowest cost fulfillment or shipping option. And so diversifying your carrier networks is going to be another really important thing. And then finally, another big trend and something that was obvious was this disruption in the supply chain, right? This isn't going away. If you go out, like if you go out to Long Beach, you'll see, tons of ships just waiting to dock and unload all of their goods. This is not going to go away. And so you have to be prepared as a brand to figure out, if you continue to have these supply chain disruptions, how are you going to serve your customer? And so this is where we talk about things like pre-sale, right? If we know that we're getting in goods, as long as you have the right policy in place and communicate to your customer the delay, I feel like in this year, customers are a lot more patient with receiving their goods. And as long as they are aware of what's going on and we're fully transparent, then you can start taking advantage of these types of technologies to pre-sell. So that's not going away. And in fact, that technology that we built is almost utilized by 100% of our client base at the moment.
Is it the technology that gives the feedback to then inform the customer? Is that what you're talking about?
No, this is the technology that actually tracks and manages the number of pre-sale orders you're taking. A new technology that we're actually building, and I know Daniel's going to love this, is the ability to split those orders, right? So if you buy an item that we don't have in stock, and then an item that you do have in stock, we'll be able to split those if you want, right? There's also considerations for doing that. You're going to be paying duplicate shipping costs, which will ultimately impact your contribution margin on the order level. However, I think it makes it's a huge win, because you're still able to take sales and not disrupt your your growth.
By the way, Dan had incredible. It looked like the expression on your face was, he's so dreamy. That's really what I got from your face as soon as the word of split order came out. So let's hear from your perspective on the brand. you know your client. Let's hear from you, Dan.
Oh no, I mean, sometimes you have to be careful with what the tools that you have at your disposal. Sometimes we might overuse them a little bit, if you know what I mean. There's been I'm kind of like notorious for like pushing for impossible like launch dates, and you know, and Donnie's flexibility to like, you know, push even harder, because sometimes, you know, if it's a week, like, you know, it's not that big of a deal, as long as we communicate to the customers, which, you know, is off. But I think at one time we had 50,000 back orders, Donnie, that you got out over a weekend when the stuff finally came. I mean, you know, you need to have that flexibility, and but you also need to, you know, you have to use those tools with within reason, and you have communication, like, you know, to the team, letting them, hey, we're going to do this. Can you guys have extra people there on Sunday, so that we can make sure, you know, when the stuff comes in, that we're going to be able to ship out as much as we can on Monday. It's just it's a partnership, really, and then basically learning how, like, what they need to know from us in order to like accommodate us, and then being able to on what technology they have and what tools and capabilities they have. It is a partnership, basically. And you know, so far, because I don't know what it is, but like, you guys over communicate. I'm not sure. I always feel like we were in the know, and we have like monthly meetings where we get updates on like progress and different, you know, technologies that are coming online, and then we get to like go, oh, this gives us an idea of how we can roll this out, like, going forward. And the split shipment thing, yeah, like, love that.
By the way, if there's themes that I'm hearing, it's invest in your partnerships and find great partners. It's over communication and being anticipatory versus reactive, right? I mean, just having sat through all these different sessions, it's authenticity and being, you know, comfortable to be vulnerable, and how you communicate that vulnerability back so that you create comfort, even though you know, you've hit a pothole, right? And to me, this actually brings us to the next question, which is like, you know, looking forward, and you touch on a few things. What are some of the potholes that entrepreneurs who are listening, like, you know, that you see, and what are the ways that they can really solve for some of the things that you see in the future? And yeah, would love to hear just that. Like, how do we avoid the potholes? Is really the key question.
Wow, that's a great.
Well,
yeah.
Sorry to cut you off. I love you, but we're gonna hear from Donnie right now.
Oh,
You
yeah.
want to hear from me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, listen, as an entrepreneur, I don't think you're ever going to avoid the potholes. I think the measure of your true success is how well you deal with those, right, as a team. However, to Dan's point, your relationship with your fulfillment partner, almost uniquely different than most of your partners that you're working with in a business, is super important, because you make money by shipping your orders, right? And so it's super critical to your success of your business with this relationship. And oftentimes, you know, when we talk to new business, new potential partners, if they're thinking of us as just another vendor, then we're not aligned here, right? Because this has to be a true partnership. We have to, like you said, be vulnerable and communicate. And also, we just have to understand that as a growing, scaling business, things are going to come up, right? Dan may come to me tomorrow and say, hey, this major retailer wants to buy 100,000 of my serums and they want it shipped in the next 2 weeks, right? Like, we have to figure out how to make that happen for him, because we don't ever want to be operations should never be the reason why you can't scale your business, right? And that's how we view our role in the ecosystem, is that we want to enable these brands so that when they get these opportunities, they can continue to scale, because if they scale, we scale. And so it's beneficial for both of us.
Daniel, let's let you back in. Sorry to cut you off before. You know, would love to hear whatever you'd like to add to that.
No, I echo what Donnie just said. Vulnerabilities, communication, and like trying to talk about the problem. 5 minutes before the pain. For example, like we noticed that we have better like return order rates, like returning customer orders when for people that receive products sooner, right? So for our West Coast customers, they get in a couple days, bam, that's great. But we notice our customers like the repeat purchases are a significant like order lower, and then we think it's you have that rush you get from purchasing something, you want to get it, and if it takes like 7 days to get there, that might wear off by the time the product arrives. You're like, oh yeah, I'm not so interested, I'm more interested in this next new shiny thing in front of me. So like talking to Donnie, like how do we do that without like incurring like we don't want to overnight everything. Maybe what is your plans for expansion on like an East Coast hub? And so like we've been talking about, we are international has been like a really important part of our business, and how can we better serve our international customers with DDP options and paying duty and freight up front, and what are those, how does that impact our, and so we sit down together with our team and we map it out and we plan it and we go, okay, so by such and such date we'll be able to do this. And so it really is, it's about over communicating. It's about like thinking of each other as partners. And like Donnie said, like as we grow, they grow. As they grow, we can grow with them too, and not have to like figure out how to bring all this in house, because that's not what we do. We make amazing hair wellness products. We are not a logistics company, and that's not a business we ever want to get into. Thank you very much, Donnie.
Thank you very much.
Actually, one thing I do want to add to that, which is also a really important point, is there's often a hesitation for some brands to be transparent about what they are thinking, only sometimes because they think they haven't made the deal yet, or they don't want to share it. But what that does is puts us at a disadvantage ultimately, because then we can't help you figure out how to optimize that. So I would also recommend that if, there could be some hesitation for privacy issues or what have you, but at the end of the day, you're going to be better served if you start having those conversations earlier so that you can execute more flawlessly.
This has been awesome. So we have one more minute here, and I want quickly, if we can get Donnie for you to comment on, what's upcoming. Split order sounds really exciting, obviously for someone here. So we'd love to hear just some other quick,
Yeah. So obviously split orders is coming up, but that's also being built because we're expanding out east to have another fulfillment center in Pennsylvania. So that's coming in the next few months as well. And that'll enable our brands that have the ability to split their inventory to hit 90% of the US population within 2 to 3 days, which, to Dan's point, can obviously increase repurchase rates. He already has data that can prove that, right? And so we obviously want to enable him to be able to take advantage of that and also save on shipping, right? So I think there's a huge advantage to that. So that's really exciting for us. And in addition to that, I would say, the split order functionality, we're also working with this new product that we're calling integrations as a service. So this will enable our brands to be able to integrate with multiple platforms, ERP, for example, but still maintain multiple connections with any instance, which is also unique for this space.
Huge. That brings us right on time. Thank you so much to you both. So inspiring, so helpful, so informative, also just energizing at large. So thank you for being here.